Can we see the council proposal now?
So that would be, let's see, I see. So that's the council proposal.
I don't mean to take over, but could we now go up and be able to look down on the shoreline a little bit?
I think that's probably the part that's not real accurate.
Let's see how it looks.
I'm just trying to get a.
Because you're interested in seeing some of the setbacks,
Okay,
I'm guessing,
there,
right?
oop. Now back a little. There, that's good, thank you.
So this is still scenario C.
Right.
So this is the council.
And can you switch back now to planning commission?
So the lower mass is the council and the taller mass is the planning commission, is that right?
No,
Is it
it's just.
Or, oh, it has, so because it has the height restriction within the 200-foot buffer?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the step up.
You see both
Oh,
at the
well,
same
that's
time. It's
helpful.
like,
Just do that. Oh, you can do them overlap now?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Though they're the same color, so it's
Right.
a little hard to
Make them
see.
different colors.
Uh-huh. And then existing. I meant the zoning.
Oh, existing zoning, so that's B.
So if I could ask a question, how have clients used this in their land use planning decisions in your experience?
So the city of Bellevue's used their model in a number of different ways. In particular, they've been interested in looking at it from a transportation standpoint. So they've been exporting it to be integrate with some different transportation modeling softwares, and looking at a certain intersection that it seems like there's a lot of conflicts, and they're trying to sort out maybe a light rail station with a bus stop, and how would that be working for the traffic and pedestrians. So they've used it in that way. They're actually, the city of Bellevue's also just now, their council has authorized what they're calling a livability, downtown livability program, and so they'll actually be using the model to look at changing some heights, allowed heights, within the downtown, and what would be the impacts of that on livability, to analyze open space. They're also using, I'm trying to remember all the work plan items for them. It was open space, connection with light rail and transit, and I think the heights were the key factors that they're using the model to analyze.
Could we now do the Olympia, the council recommendation at this height and just now go down West Bay for a little while?
At this height?
Yeah, and just continue down the shoreline.
Maybe while he's doing that, one other way that other jurisdictions have been using a model like this is actually looking at, based on the potential, looking at land use and transportation relationship and what, based on potential build out, the carbon impact might be of development. So that's another way that you could link it with data if you're interested to see if you're meeting your climate change goals.
So, just with an eye on that time, I just want to check in about council's interest and also Steve gets some insight about what's next. And for council members, what are you thinking? You got more questions? Want to see different aspects?
Well, I have a couple specific questions about, so how much have we spent so far? 40?
The entire project is $45,000.
And this is it?
This is it.
This is it for the 45. So if we
More or
wanted,
less.
if we wanted to see more of visuals like Bellevue did, is that what you said, Bellevue?
Mhm.
With some buildings that showed a more relational. I have no idea what the finances are, but I think it's hard for us, particularly along the shoreline, to visualize the way it is right now. And I don't know if it's too expensive to continue, to try to do something that like Bellevue did in just certain parts, or like Steve was suggesting, in specific portions of the SMP that we have concerns specifically with, that we could get more specific in the presentation.
And can I just clarify to you what, I think I'm sort of on the same wavelength here. The deal is, in terms of what we've got in place right now, I think I'm really curious and maybe digging in a little bit deeper on some of the sites that we just started
And
looking at.
pick some specific
and-
sites.
And see exactly at what level we can manipulate the modeling that we just purchased to the extent where we can get some satisfaction about pretty much the SMP.
Right.
I mean, I think,
And in
I-
particular, the controversial areas, I think we would benefit from seeing some contrast.
so what I'm not clear about is whether or not, if we had more time, if we could dig in on one parcel and say, what are we really looking at in terms of the modeling right now? And can we factor in some of the things that I think exist that further constrain those sites, or are we really left with the boxes that we see there? And do we need to do we have enough data and enough control of this model now to do all those things? Is that, I see people going yes,
That
but
makes sense.
Steve.
Well, so, I guess I mean, that was kind of my, I think, closely related to my earlier question about effort and ease of change. But, so, and especially along the shoreline, like, for example, looking at what the West Bay plan would look like at build-out. You know, that would be useful to know. I mean, the way it is right now, it's not terribly useful because it goes over lines. It doesn't include, you know, where the roads are, you know, things like that. Because I think we're really trying to get a sense of what the visual impact would be of having, you know, build-out kind of things. And I realize that especially in areas like West Bay, it can be kind of funky just because of how lines are drawn and how roads were sort of built because there was room there and they weren't really, you know, it doesn't really necessarily reflect some of the data that this model is built on. And I guess I'm curious as to how much effort and how much cost it would be to make that fit better to what would be in fact done, as opposed to just some very rough stuff that really doesn't give us enough visual information to see the impacts.
Do you know?
And
It's hard to say offhand without totally understanding the details behind, for example, you know, the West Bay plan and other, you know, the scope of that. But it's certainly the intent of the model is to be flexible, to allow for change, so that's in place. I also wanted to just add, part of what our scope entails, that's already approved, is some staff training time. So hopefully that will also be of assistance to help with the city's capacity internally to be able to explore some of these questions, and I think you know, we can always assist as well depending on, you know, goals and everything like that, but there will be some staff training as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of bumped into a problem spot actually, so just totally accidentally. And it seems to me that when we get to the downtown area, that it's a much better representation of what would actually happen, just, you know, without having looked at it
Yeah.
as much detail as this one. So I'm just wondering if maybe some of the training could involve working on some of those corrections as a way to both get training, but also fix some problem areas that we really do want to look at closely.
And address the hot spots.
Yeah, so in terms of next steps, we've brought up some questions and some desire, you know, to try to understand exactly how we can put the model to use to some of the near-term challenges that we're facing on the SMP. And it sounds like there's a little bit of sorting out to do between staff and our contractor about what we can actually do with the things that we've got right here versus if there's a need for additional investment to get further details that we might be interested in order to look at scenarios related to the SMP.
Yes.
Okay, so you will, what's the next steps in terms of the?
Well, the next steps, as Jason and Aaron indicated, are that we are going to continue this contract. We have training coming up in the month of January. That training, I think your idea, Councilmember Langer, is a good one in regards to using that training as an opportunity to focus maybe on an area like West Bay and refine that. Clearly, that doesn't reflect the realities of what can be built and what likely will be built. Beyond that, then, we'll need to get into some discussions with Mithun and with our own staff about what our capacities are and what our needs are as far as the particulars of West Bay Drive, for example. If you really want to dig into that, then, and I think there's value there, particularly as we talk about the Shoreline Master Program, then let's do that. Let's define what our needs are there and we'll develop a scope and a price and see if that's affordable and desirable.
And what time frame are we talking about?
We're talking about finishing the training in January. So we can be looking at these other questions during that same time period. So I would think, you know, certainly by the end of the month, we would have a handle on what we were able to do with our training and then what remains undone and what that gap is and what the cost is to close that gap either from our own internal staff capacity or employing Jason and Aaron to finalize that for us. The way we envision this is that Mithun has built us a model, it's a tool. We don't really know how to use the tool right now. We're going to develop the capacity to use that tool probably over the course of the next year. Slowly we'll work our way into being able to be 100% self-sufficient with it, but until then we're going to rely on Aaron and Jason and Mithun for that support. So we recognize that there's going to be some transition there and that, yeah, maybe we'll need to employ them if we have specific questions, which I think obviously we do. So I think we know what we need to do next.
Okay, and reporting back, land use, is that the next bump or?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. So are we good for now? Or appreciate the
Thank you.
demonstration.
Thank you.
I feel very badly about the kamikaze ducks that we lost in the process.
It happens.
You know, I imagine they're better expendable than
Much easier.
So with that said, we are, this meeting, this study session is adjourned and we will reconvene at council at 7 p.m.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Yes,
It was
thanks for having us.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Great.
Appreciate the questions. It's great of you all to just kind of dive into.
Yeah.
It's a pretty powerful tool.
It is. It's just so hard because the areas that we're really focusing on shoreline happens to be this area that
Right.
is,
But when the data is just
where the plot lines are.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's
Show us something.
the minute you, it's like the minute you see the 3D representation, then you immediately think, wait a minute, what were my 2D sources and are they accurate and why is this behaving that way? Right, so I'm sure, right, that those water regulations probably.
Yeah, and so the water regulations, they can't build over anymore, so some of those we can bring back. And so hopefully, when you guys are explaining it to our staff how to do it, we could.
Yeah, I mean, we can really dial in on any area and not make them blue blocks. They can be whatever we want them to be. So the idea is that we can just strip away parts and pieces, focus on some areas.
Is it going to be possible? Okay, so let's say we have the envelope now. It's a little, maybe more accurate, not underwater, which is not your fault at all. I totally understand.
Yeah.
So then, would we be able to then, because you said within that envelope, you could put the building within the envelope and say, well, we put it here,
Say, what if, for example, there was a building?
Yeah, then we could just,
that'd be great.
and then what about a little bit of step back from how?
Yeah, I think any of those things we can look at, definitely. And it's interesting, we were talking a bit with Keith and Paul about it and saying, because there were some other questions that came up, of course. And, in some cases it's like we're almost doing an urban design exercise in a way.
Yeah.
And for us, we feel a little bit uncomfortable without understanding totally the goals and the intent to suggest something. Like we almost envision this iterative process where we really are sitting down with somebody, who has a better grasp of either policy goals or whatever that might be to work back and forth and test things.
That would be fun.
I think that would be sort of the ideal.
That's the idea.
Yeah, or with
That's
you guys.
what the tool is for. Yeah, that's what it's for.
Maybe part of it too is, and we better check this out before I say, oh, let's do this, but a little bit more for design review as well, to give you a better idea. I think that, so, because if we were to go to a form-based code,
Right.
that would really change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Visualize that.
Yeah, and I should say, certainly with the way we write the rules and everything, I mean, you could have your rules reflect the form-based code. You could see what the implications would be.
Okay.
So that could be an option.
okay, that might be something, because if we're toying with looking at maybe eventually, get things to go that direction, so
Yeah, it's something to think about. I mean, even like the city of Bellevue, they require, Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, that when somebody is submitting a building proposal, they have them submit their 3D model of the proposed building.
told us that.
Yeah, we wrote requirements so that their model evolves
I
over
think
time.
that's.
So they actually then get the new buildings put in. So for example, we have the new museum in here.
yeah.
And the city hall is in there, much more detail. So instead of just the blocks, you go to city hall and you can see the flags. Yeah, in this model, you would, the Capitol building.
Because they're already 3D modeled, so
Yeah, so you can add over time, these just can evolve.
Or in design review, you could say, hey, submit your three scenarios, and then we could put it in and see how
It would be easy to just plug those in.
How we do?
So I think that's part of it. It's a lot of it for us is going to be not only the zoning, but if we switch to form-based code that wipes out zoning, it would really go to the design.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that's where we are really interested in this and feel like it has a lot of potential because it's beyond. I mean, it is the 3D envelopes, which is useful. I think more useful than colored map.
It is. Meaning, it gives you that volume.
The box?
Yeah, it gives you some of the
volume.
box.
So each box you're calling an envelope?
Right, yes. I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. Yes. So each box. But
that's the
within
entire
that box, within that box, there could be a building that could go, it could be the height of that building could be built up to the top of the box.
Yes.
Any of the walls could go to any of the
Yes.
edges of the box.
Tough duty.
But in all likelihood, probably if somebody built a building,
Right.
it wouldn't be
It's
the
just
shape of
interesting that you call it an envelope.
Yeah, that's what it's
that just
oftentimes
your-
called zoning envelope.
Like
Zoning envelope.
It's because it's volume as well as it's more three-dimensional. It's not just the two-dimensional on top of the square. It's sort of like when you think of cubic yard of dirt. It's the square by square by square.
Yeah.
That's how you kind of.
And so you can fill the envelope, is that
Yes,
right?
yes. Technically by zoning you could, unless you have setbacks and some of the, or some of those things, and that would impact where in the envelope you can be placed. So it's kind of, think of it as a placeholder. placeholder in time and space.
Yes.
It's a
Right.
placeholder.
No, I get that part of it, I just was puzzled by the term envelope.
And when you were referring, we should be sure to define that somewhere.
Yeah,
Documentation.
the different lingo you were using.
Yeah.
That would be helpful, because when we take it to the public, they're gonna be going,
They
I
won't
don't
know.
know.
They won't know what.
Where's the stamp?
That's well, and I think I was trying so careful, we've been really trying to be careful to not call it a building, because it's really not what the building would look like probably.
No,
But you're right, we should consider.
but, I mean, you could call it, I don't know, the circumference of the building, or the mass of what.
The mass of what it could be,
What it could potentially be.
Yeah.
something like that, to try and describe.
This is the potential.
But we need to
build out.
explain, it doesn't mean it would use that.
Planning commission.
And that's where, yeah.
I'm all into the plain talk. I don't know if you've heard of that from the state of Washington, where all the agencies were asked to use terminology that will help them.
No, it's good,
So
it's good.
I keep trying to think of things where we want the public to buy out, participate.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I absolutely agree. But it's always a good reminder, it's good to have other people here.
Yeah.
Hear the same thing
See, if
because
I had
everybody-
sat through the screening, I would have asked a ton more questions, but I'm
I
so
know.
busy.
We've been watching with HGTV.
Yes, I
So
know.
we can we just have a private
Well, let's see,
conversation?
we're both on land use and we,
You can cruise around the model, you can do
And I
whatever
wanted
you
to
want, you can make it
grab
rain.
See,
you
I
can-
want to play with it.
I know, we didn't get to the
I
rain.
need one of my kids to navigate it, but I want to go here.
Start the steering wheel and go down. But
We should
anyway,
actually go over to the city hall real quick just to show them more detail on it or something. You could. Let's get our whole watch quick. I know.
that's what we want. We want to have Dad, do not take my picture.
You have
Yes, I did. I was like this.
Dad,
It's all about the
Here.
non.
Just running out.
I mean, the city manager was talking about architecture. It's like when you build the mass, then what can you see? What's that other stuff? Yeah, what's the other stuff? Like when we're,
I know.
the neighborhood goes up above
Got the
all that.
right of way.
Stand up, by the way, you ended up blocking the view.
The right of way and the road, this, they're just, they have some, not even close. And of course, right,
Yeah, exactly. That's really amazing.
This is the expert.
You for a walk.
Really?
I know.
Wonder what they did on your flag. When they get down the shore, which is what they're, you've got to link up with this one.
So in that area along West Main, we'll actually have probably a series of buildings that
Hey, why don't we, here's the deal. Here's the deal.
I don't know, is there wine involved?
Yeah, I can get you some gallows specials. Isn't that right?
Well, there we go.
No, we can go for that. We can go up to that high quality.
Reach back to the 70s.
I'd like to talk to you about it and see what you're thinking about it after.
And I haven't read your book. I've got them all in. But I do have some ideas.
Oh, look. Oh, that's fun. You should have showed us that.
Come on.
I know, and it was so quiet. That's why I started yapping up a little bit. Because they're
We'll see at City Hall.
Just get elevate our presence.
Yeah, and I think that's a big one. Somebody needs to decide, how can we hey, it can be this high, it can't come on.
Yeah. No.
Even if we let them, they don't want to.
No, so we need a
So
more
you need to come up
realistic.
with what's a plausible.
Yes. Hi.
Can you come on, just
Sure.
to see it? Yeah. City Hall.